Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Adam Grundy. Thank you. You may begin.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Grundy, and I want to welcome you to today's Business Formation Statistics webinar. I'll be your host for today's session. The Business Formation Statistics, also known as the BFS, is an experimental data product that provides timely and high-frequency information on new business applications and formations in the United States. The BFS measures business initiation activity and the cycle from initiation to realize business formation. The BFS gives an early look at business formation activity within the United States at a detailed state level as well as regional level. This webinar will be recorded. The webinar recording and transcript will be available between 5 to 10 business days after the presentation. If we experience any technical delays, please utilize the chat feature to notify us of any issues should they arise, and we'll do our best to address them. Lastly, at the end of the presentation, we'll open the lines for a question and answer session over the phone. To allow everyone an opportunity to ask a question on the phone, we request that you ask one question and one follow-up question. Also, we'll be monitoring the chat throughout this presentation. I would now like to introduce our lead presenter, Allison Smola, and Allison is the team lead for the Business Formation Statistics program. I'll now turn it over to you, Allison.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. As Adam said, my name is Allison Smola, and I work in the Economic Indicators Division of the Census Bureau. And today I'm presenting on Business Formation Statistics, one of the Census Bureau's experimental data products. This content has been presented in webinars previously, but there have been substantive updates since those previous webinars. And so first, I'm going to jump into some background on how the business formation statistics were developed, and then what data we publish. And at the end, I will do demonstration on how to access our data on our website and use our data tools. So the Business Formation Statistics, or BFS, provide timely, more frequent measurements of early-stage new business formations. Prior to BFS, the earliest insight we had to these formations was the Census Bureau's Business Dynamic Statistics, and this offers annual information on business entry with a 2-year lag. But now with BFS, we can offer monthly and even weekly insight. The data source for the BFS is the IRS's EIN applications, which is also commonly known as the SS4 form. These data are delivered each week to the Census Bureau. It is administrative data, and the BFS does not require any additional or new data collection or respondent burden. Using the information on that form, we are able to create series on the number of business applications filed, as well as actual and projected business formations originating from these applications. BFS started as a collaborative research project with economists from the Census Bureau, as well as economists from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and the universities of Maryland and Notre Dame. The BFS were first released as a research product on Valentine's Day, February 14, 2018. The research data were really well received, and the research staff soon began working with production staff to transition the BFS data into a production alongside of our other economic data products. This slide provides the outcomes of that transition. In the summer of 2019, we had fully transitioned BFS to production, and we released the first quarterly BFS experimental data product in July of 2019. One of the benefits of moving the data product to a production home is that our indicator production staff were well-versed in efficient processing. As part of the transition, we made it a priority to identify areas for improvement in the processing and implemented those improvements where we could. One such improvement related to that is when the geocoded variables were applied to our data set. Previously, it was applied monthly, but we worked with our production staff to have those variables applied each week. Immediately in the when we received the data sets from the IRS. It was a very small processing change that at the time we were excited about because it cut our quarterly processing time nearly in half, and we didn't have to wait a month lag for waiting for those variables. But this small change became even more important than we could realize in the spring of 2020. It allowed us to quickly pivot to producing a weekly BFS when the pandemic began, and there was a critical need for timely data across the country. On April 9th, 2020, we published the first weekly BFS with application data at the national and regional level, and the data was published just 5 days after the week's end. Almost immediately after that release went out, we received emails from our data users asking for state-level data on a weekly basis, and we started publishing that the following week. Knowing that this information was critical during the pandemic, we've been fairly agile in adapting the weekly BFS to meet our data users' needs. We added a one-time release of the weekly series by NAICS in October 2020, and then we also added an annual release of business applications at the county level in November 2020, and that first release provided data through 2019. We will continue to do the weekly release for as long as there is a need and the interest, but we also recognized that the quarterly publication of the full BFS report was not timely enough anymore. As such, January 2021 was our last release of the quarterly data, and then beginning in February 2021, we switched to a monthly publication of the full BFS report. And with that monthly release, we also began publishing the national level with 2-digit NAICS sectors. And then recently, July 1st, 2021, we released our second annual business applications by county, which added data for 2020. The BFS data are published on various frequencies and granularities. Weekly data are typically published every Thursday by noon, 4 business days after the observed period. Monthly data are typically published the second week or about 7 to 8 business days after the observed period. We're still working out a routine county publication schedule, but the latest data was, like I said, was published July 1st, 2021. And BFS has 4 application series that are based on tabulations of filtered SS4 form counts. Those series are featured in our weekly, our monthly, and one of them in the annual county publication. BFS also has 8 formation series that capture the applications that lead to businesses with employees. Those series are featured in our monthly publication. And as stated previously, our monthly publication also includes industry counts for all 12 series at the national level. And one thing I wanted to point out here, our monthly series is also available with seasonally adjusted data, or you could use the non-seasonally adjusted data as well. You might ask yourself, well, what's in these 12 series? So we'll jump into that now. To generate the 4 different business application series, we apply several filters to the incoming EIN applications based on application characteristics noted on the application form. We do this because not all of the EIN applications are for businesses. Our core application series are the business applications, or BA series, and it contains all applications except those that are for non-business purposes. And those excluded applications are things like trusts, estates, tax liens, public entities, and other businesses with little business intent. And then of that, we also feature a series called High Propensity Business Applications, or HBA, and these are applications with a relatively high likelihood of becoming employer businesses in the future. These likely employer applications satisfy one or more of the following criteria. They're from a corporate entity, they indicate they're hiring employees, purchasing a business, or changing organizational type. They provide a first wages paid or a date they plan on paying wages, or they can be a part of certain industries like manufacturing, part of retail, healthcare, or accommodation and food services. And then we further subset the HBAs to 2 subsets with a particularly high probability of turning into an employer business. These are the applications with planned wages and applications from corporations. And then this next slide shows the relationship of the incoming EIN applications how we then publish the BA series, how the HBA is a subset of the BA series, and then the subset of the WBA and the CBA series. And then to jump into the 8 business formation series. So in addition to the applications, we also identify the employer business formations from the incoming applications using the Census Bureau's Longitudinal Business Database, or LBD. This linkage provides the incidence and timing of employer business births. Business formations within 4 quarters, or BF4Q, is the series that tracks employer businesses that originate from business applications within 4 quarters from the time of application. However, this series does not cover recent years because business formation information in the LBD has a lag of 2 years, and the most recent publication includes data for 2018. Given the forward-looking nature of business formations, the Census Bureau can only state actual business formations within 4 quarters up to December 2017. To fill that gap, we provide model-based projected business formation series, or the PBF4Q, for the period in which actuals are not yet available. So we do this for the entire time series, but it's probably the most important date is where the actuals drop off. And so from January 2018, we only have the projected formations. And then we also have our duration series, which is the average duration in quarters from business application to business formation. And then we also have our sliced business formation series, which combines the actual business formations with the projected business formations to provide a nice complete time series for the actuals and the projections. And then I think this graph, this slide shows the slice series, and you can see how we have actual through December 2017, and then we have the projections picking up in January 2018, running through our most recent publication, which includes June 2021 data. And then in addition to the 4-quarter windows for all of those series, we also provide 8-quarter windows, and that completes our 8 formation series. And at this time, this is our program area's website and our contact information. And I'll pause here and answer any questions if they're in the chat.
Sure. So, Allison, we did have a couple of questions that came in the chat. The first one is from Danielle, and it's, do you track by MBE, WBE, and SBA, or et cetera, certification?
So we do not have any demographic information associated with these applications. So we don't have any sort of minority, or I think that's what those questions are, like minority business owners or like women business owners. We don't have any of that information. And then we're also not getting a size of these enterprises from these applications. There is work of possibly adding information like this in the future, but it's really far off at this point. So it's a no for now. It might not be a no forever.
Okay, thank you. Is data on the PPF4Q available at the county level geography?
It's not. So at the county level, we only have the business applications, just one, our overall one series. And that's just due to like our disclosure prevention systems and, you know, not disclosing any data that could be identifiable.
Okay, and we have one more question in the chat before we get into your demo, Allison, which is, do these type of data include the ability to disaggregate by the business type?
So that's one thing that we also don't have, like the legal form of organization, but really the only breakout we have is whether it's a corporation or not. But as for other business types, we do not have that information at the moment.
Okay, and their follow-up question was, they meant by business type the type of NAICS code. So would that be broken out?
So, yeah, we do have, sorry for misunderstanding, at the U.S. level, we do have 2-digit industry information. but only at the U.S., so the two-digit NAICS codes.
Okay, thank you, Allison. So the next part of our presentation, Allison is going to be guiding us through a demo of the BFS website, which I've put in the chat, which is also located on the center of your screen. So Allison, if you can please take us through the demo.
Okay. So at this point, you should be seeing like our main business formation statistics website. And this is where our most recently released data and information will appear. The website is segmented into the frequencies of our releases, the monthly, the weekly, and then we have the annual right here. And then we do have supplemental information on the sides about like related sites and announcements. So I'll start with the annual county data, and I'll work our way back up to the monthly. Just basic navigation here, we have this data dictionary, and this is basically a file format of what's in this Excel file. And you can download, this is available for download here. And then there is a Tableau visualization, which is seemingly not loading. There we go. And so the county uses differential privacy as its protection mechanism, and the budgets are listed in the Excel file format as well as on our methodology. But this visualization, and because county delineations can change over time, we only have the most recent data in counties displayed. There is no option to look at different time periods. And as the note states right here, the area of each circle is proportional to the number of 2020 business applications for the state. And then the color is representative of the percent change from 2019 to 2020. If you hover over a dot for the state, let's say Mississippi, a graph of the business applications by year populates for the state with the number of business applications on top and its percentage increase or decrease. And then if you were to actually click on the state, it'll take you to the county map for it. And the same notes as applies from before. The area of the circle is proportional to the number of 2020 applications, and the color of which is percent change. And just like the state view, if you were to hover over a specific county, a graph of the business applications by year populates for the state, and then the number of business applications at the top and its percentage increase or decrease. So this is Hinds County, Mississippi, and it has the largest circle within Mississippi, and it has almost 7,000 business applications, and over 13% of the business applications for the state were received in Hinds County. And then likewise, if you take into consideration two surrounding counties, Madison and Rankin, those three counties make up over 23% of the incoming business applications for the state of Mississippi. And for reference, Jackson, Mississippi is kind of located in the middle of these three counties here, like right on this border. So. Then you can click back on the back arrow, and it'll take you back to the visualization as the state map view. And if you're interested, you can, jump in and do some of your more exploration of the data. And that Tableau is going slowly for me at the moment. But the next piece is our weekly data, and this is collected and released typically on Thursday by 12 p.m. There is some changing with that as, like Thanksgiving's on a Thursday, so in cases like that, we'll release on Wednesday. We have our file layout available here, and then our week date file, and this is basically just a file letting you know what days BFS considers part of each week. And then the three files we release, one for the U.S., the region, and the state. And then back toward the top, we have our main bread and butter of BFS, our monthly data. And like the other releases, we again have a monthly data dictionary of what's included in the file, And then similar to the weekly data, we have a month date file to let us know, to let the users know what weeks and days BFS considers part of a month. And then we have we put out a press release each month, and it has some top line application formation numbers, graphics, and information. And then if you go back, we also have the entire time series of all 12 BFS series in this downloadable CSV file. And it just, if you download that, it'll just open in Excel. And again, the descriptions as to what is in those columns and what they mean and the variable names are found in the data dictionary. So then there's also this time series and trend charts, which I'll get to in a bit. But now I want to focus on this image in the middle, which is actually a hyperlink that will take you to our monthly visualizations, which get hosted on our data tab that are loading right now. So each month we put out 2 visualizations, one a map and one is our dashboard. And in the map, you can change what series you want to look at as I wait for this to catch up a little bit. And in order to keep the monthly availability consistent, you can only look at the spliced business formations out of the formation series. But if you click on this question mark here, it'll pull up definitions as to, what's included, or like the definitions of the various series types and like what you can select from. And you can select most months of our time series here. You have that. By the default, it's the most recent that we've released, in this case, June 2021 data. And then you can also select month-to-month change or year-over-year change. And I'll just leave these as the defaults for now. And so the U.S. total numbers will always be over in the right here, but it will change if you were to select year to year. This will change. This is month to month percent change right now, but once this populates, it'll be year to year change. And the colors of the percent change are shaded according to that legend. And below the map, we have 4% changes by region, and then the time series for the selected type and for the selected geography, which at the moment is U.S. because I haven't selected a state. We'll go back to month. And if I were to select a state, I'm going to go ahead and select New Mexico. And the U.S. comparison will remain on the right side, but the region of the state which is selected is now highlighted down below, and the time series right here changes to that of the selected state. And if you were to hover over the state, the specific number and the percent change is populated. And then you can easily compare how this specific state fares against the U.S. overall and the surrounding region and, like the trend of applications within New Mexico over time. And you can change these to, formations or the high propensity applications. And then the next piece, our dashboard here, is actually 6 visualizations in one, but there's some similarities between them. The first one is our business applications and our high propensity applications over time. The height of the top part is the number of overall business applications, and then the yellow bottom part, HBA is a subset of BA, as we went over before. So the bottom part is showing of the BA, how many of those were high propensity. And if you hover over the bottom part, the tooltip will populate with the data and let you know that, of those 448,000, 152,000 were considered high propensity. And if you were interested in the ones that were non-high propensity, if you hover over this top part there, it'll tell you almost 300,000 of them were non-high propensity. And then in these visualizations, because like the second set in the dashboard, because we no longer have the geographic detail like we did in the map, we can now manipulate the visualizations by NAICS industry. And so you can just select whatever NAICS industry you're interested in. Let's just do retail trade, and the visualization will populate for those specific numbers. So if we were to look into July 2020, there were like almost 120,000 business applications in retail, and of which almost 35,000 were considered high propensity, and about 85,000 were non-high propensity. And then, as you may have remembered from when I was running through the definitions of high propensity, certain NAICS sectors are considered all high propensity. So if you were to look at one of those sectors, say like manufacturing, the entire graph shows as high propensity. And then similar, we said that HBA is a subset of BA, and then WBA is a subset of HBA. So we have a similar graph, but displaying the relationship between the high propensity and the applications from planned wages. And you'll notice here that I didn't make any changes to my selections of my NAICS, and that the NAICS are sticky in this piece of the visualization. So if you didn't want to look at manufacturing, you'd have to go and change this again. So here, if you were to just look, we have 930 applications planned on paying their wages, or had a planned wages date of the almost 6,500 high propensity applications in manufacturing. And then the last visualization, not last, but we also have a visualization showing the same relationship between the high propensity and the business applications from corporations. And that's that third one right here. And then the fourth one is we have to show the formation series some love. So we have an interactive visualization by NAICS for our splice formation series within 4 quarters. And again, the NAICS dropdown is here, and so we can see how everything we're projecting and for which data is not yet available, and then this is all actuals, and we have that shaded there to kind of indicate to you guys like the break there. And then we have 2 visualizations for that state geography again. And because we're going into the state level geography, you lose the industry data, but you gain information by state. And you can compare, what's nice about this one is you can compare the 4 application types together. And so I'm just going to do a state as an example. We'll go Montana. The visualization will update, and you can, hover over it and follow the line and get the applications from the tooltip. And then similarly, we also have the same kind of idea with the spliced business formations. We have a visualization for the states and the spliced data. And the states are sticky again, so you'd have to go and make a different selection if you wanted. And then the visualization will populate. Okay. And then below the visualizations, we have all of our previous press releases, kind of like an archive. You can see the switch from quarter to monthly. And then we also have our historical, our last quarterly release listed at the bottom of our website here. And as promised, I said I would go over the time series trend charts. You can link to these a number of ways from the main page here on the data page. We have it in our, the economic indicators use this tool. So if you were to link from one of the dashboards or our briefing room, you can come here to the time series trend chart. So this tool, once it loads, is another way to access our data. And what's nice about this is being able to view and download specific subsets of data. Since our CSV file is the entire time series, if you kind of want a smaller subset, this is great. And it's point-and-click interface, which some people really prefer. So you have to just make 5 basic selections, and because we're coming from the BFS website, business formations are already populated in this first selection. But if you wanted to, you could definitely select some other sort of data. And this is the date range by default. This is the beginning and end year of our time series. 3 is the drop-down of industry. The total is default. And then here's the drop down of our 12 series included in our data, and then 5 is a drop down of all of the available geographies that we publish. If you were to select an industry here, you'll notice that number 5, you can only select the U.S. And then lastly, you have the option to pool seasonally adjusted or non-seasonally adjusted data. So if you make any changes here, like I did here in the professional services, you'll have to hit Get Data. And these tables below will repopulate with the professional services U.S. total business applications and the breakout by month. And then you can also download these data into tables for your own use. We have the text file, a vertical file, so this will just be like a long, skinny file of the year and the month, or like the month and the data with it. And then this XLS-H will download a file that looks like this, a wide file. And then what's nice here is you can also create your own bar charts or line charts based on the 5 criteria. What I like about this is, like, in the visualizations, you kind of get a similar line chart, but you can only pick from those 5 series that we gave you. So and you only got the seasonally adjusted data. So if you wanted one of the other 7 series, you're able to get them here, and you can also look at the non-seasonally adjusted data and you can limit the scope to a specific time period as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and make some changes here. We'll go total, and we'll go for the state of California. I'm going to leave these as both because I'm going to show that you can populate 2 line charts at the same time. It'll yell at you for not having, or for having too many years selected, which I think for a line chart looks nice, but in the bar chart, it does look kind of messy. So on top, we have our seasonally adjusted data. On the bottom, we have the non-seasonally adjusted data, and I just zoomed out a little bit on my browser so that I was able to see both of those at the same time and just kind of see the effects of the seasonal adjustment that we perform. And then I'm going to go back to our website. Maybe not. And then I mentioned that we did have a weekly release, a one-time special weekly release with our NAICS codes. With this one actually goes down to 3-digit NAICS codes. And that's all the data is found on our special projects tab. So here's the Excel files for those. And then we do have some images here to, kind of show you what the breakout was with that. And then on the how the data are collected, we have information about our methodology, like the model we use to get the projections, our method of seasonal adjustment, and how we're assigning NAICS codes. And then we also have definitions and frequently asked questions. So that's it in terms of website navigation and how to access our data and the demo I have. So I'll turn it back to Adam and the operator and answer any other questions, I guess, that came in through the chat.
Sure. So before I connect with the operator for the phone line questions, first of all, I want to thank Allison for the informative presentation on the BFS data, as well as the tools to use to access the data. Then we did have a couple different questions that came in through the chat. The first one is about two-digit NAICS in the BFS API, if that's going to be a plan or not, or if it's already there.
It's not currently in API. I guess to be completely honest, I'm not sure why it's not. It's definitely probably something that will be added in the future, but not at this time.
Okay. And another question was about two-digit NAICS level at the county level for BFS.
It's tough because once you get into some counties are very rural, and some of the bigger counties, that's like not a problem. There's a lot of business applications that we're receiving, but every time that we are like adding more information, we're adding like more information and identifiable information. So the more you splice and cut the data and disaggregate it, the more information that is being given up. So I don't think NAICS at the county level will kind of be a possibility, but we have been very agile so far with business formation statistics. That one seems kind of like a long shot, but I don't want to say never.
Okay, sure. Another question was about applications and formations by NAICS by state in the future, if that's ever going to be considered.
So that one is probably more likely to be considered than like the county would be, but it would require a lot of resources to do that, and we're a fairly small staff working on this. But again, never say never, I guess.
Okay. All right, so thank you everyone for your interest in our data and for those attending today's webinar. Before we begin the Q&A session with our operator, please take note of the contact information that Allison will put up in just a moment from the PowerPoint. And as a reminder, we're focusing our Q&A on today's topic, and we'll be accepting questions to today's topics as the main priority. If you have other questions, please feel free to send an email to ask.census.gov, and I'll put that in the chat in just a moment. And now we'd like to open up the lines for the Q&A portion of this session. So let's check in with our operator, and if you can please provide the instructions, which were also included in the chat, for listeners to ask questions. So please let me just pause for a moment for the operator to see if we have any questions on the phone.
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question by phone, please press star 1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly. Your name is required to introduce your question. If you need to withdraw your question, press star 2. Again, to ask a question by phone, please press star 1. It will take a few moments for questions to come through. Please stand by.
Okay, and while we wait for a couple of different questions to come in, Allison, we had one question about the interesting trends you've noticed in the BFS data. We've had a previous data user that, had this question about, other interesting trends that you've noticed as of late.
So I think one thing that was definitely surprising to us, and I think you could see it in the visualizations that I walked through, at least like the time series, like the time series trend charts, and when I created that line graph, there was a very large spike in applications received in July 2020, and that was surprising to a lot of economists, of which I am not an economist, but it was surprising to economists that we're seeing, like initially with COVID and the pandemic, we saw like in April 2020, like a huge drop in the data, but then in July 2020, like the numbers have rebounded and they've remained higher at the higher levels, considering all of the previous time series data that we have.
Great, thanks, Allison. Operator, do we have any questions on the phone line?
We are showing no questions by phone at this time.
Okay, the last question I have from, again, a previous data user was about the primary data users of the BFS data.
So BFS has been featured a lot in the press, I would say. So like the press is definitely a good user of the data. Fred, like the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, uses our data a lot, and the Congressional Budget Office, the Small Business Administration, and the Federal Reserve are probably some of our main users of the data.
Okay, and I do see one additional question about race and ethnicity or gender of business owners. I believe that would be addressed in the annual business survey program, but is there anything of note for that for the BFS?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Operator, just want to check in one last time and see if there are any questions on the phone.
We are still showing no questions by phone.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. At this moment, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to everyone for attending today's webinar. This concludes today's presentation, and please stay tuned to the website provided in the chat for when the presentations and slides will be posted to our site. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.